Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar, Extending Your Reach with Video Conferencing and Telepresence. My name is Kevin Cook and I'm a Market Development Manager with Terakai Corporation. Today I'm pleased to introduce Michael O'Brien. Michael is an industry leader on the topic of video and collaboration and will present today on video conferencing and telepresence, a major trend in business communications. Without further delay, welcome Michael.
Kevin, thanks for having me in for this session. And what we're going to be going over today is to really get into video conferencing itself as a viable technology to help companies save in a lot of different ways, and also to increase their collaborative capabilities within their organizations, as well as extending it out into their business partner community. So really what we're looking at is today's business itself is being in kind of a transition phase, and what a lot of people are typically used to going to work, nowadays people have work more coming to them. So as we begin in a more globalization type atmosphere, how can we start dealing with things when we're in one time zone? So no longer is it acceptable anymore in terms of customer turnaround or customer satisfaction of having to wait for 12 or 16 hours, or within my own organization, how can I collaborate with other business entities that might be 12 hours behind me or 12 hours ahead of me? So we're looking at things from a one time zone type standpoint. We're also looking at a workforce that's increasingly more mobile. So, the concept of having your typical cubicle and maybe a commute into work, that's no longer happening, as companies are taking more of a green initiative and allowing their employees to do things like work from home or telework, or having those field workers and still allow them to collaborate internally with their teammates, just like as if they were sitting in the same office. Now, we're also looking at things like working moments. So no longer do people have that typical 9 to 5 schedule. More now, I find myself answering emails at times like 8:30 at night, or having a customer call me from a different time zone when it's outside of my typical work hours. We're also looking at businesses that are trying to secure their assets and to keep a better bird's eye view on their entire organization from a security standpoint. That particularly comes into play when we get into the healthcare markets, government markets, education markets, as security and surveillance become more and more of a necessity in order to keep their business safe. And we're also looking at things like regulatory compliances. So how can we secure our information and also be up to par with the different regulations that have come out that your own company may be faced with? Now, some of the reasons why this climate change is happening, for one, is demographics. So we've got a shift in the workforce, our actual human resources within the workforce. So Generation Y, it's really changing the workforce landscape. If any of you have kids out there that find themselves, you watch them in their text messaging for 23 out of the 24 hours of the day. I mean, I know some people that can actually text message in their sleep. The Generation Y is used to having technology as tools in order to accomplish the goals they have. So whether it's from a younger generation, or now that we're seeing that younger generation enter into the workforce, they're almost demanding this type of technology in order to make their working moments more effective. We're also looking at that employee virtualization. So we're going back to that teleworker standpoint. So how can I extend out my working environment to those that are going to be working from home? How can I bring in experts from my company that might not physically be located in my office? How can I make sure that they're available, and how can I get that face-to-face feel that most customers are used to from a customer visit, or a client visit? We're also looking at that externalization of the business. So how can I spread from a global aspect, so to spread my reach? And when you spread that reach, you're also inviting in additional competitive opportunities out there. And how can you move your business to the competitive edge, where you have the technology, you have the collaboration capabilities to put your company ahead on that competitive landscape? Now, we also have, from an externalization, more and more companies are looking at outside partners to help grow their business as well. So think about your own company and all of the different vendors or partners that you may work with. How can we make those interactions more successful as well as find different ways so that we can get turnaround and find a more collaborative way to bring all of us together. Now, why does video help all of this? So when we talk video, it's kind of like watching TV versus reading a book. Yeah, reading a book, it allows you to be a little bit more imaginative, but when we want to get into interactions with either clients or customers or even people within your own company, think of the power that a face-to-face interaction has. So that old saying of a picture is worth 1,000 words, that's what video is trying to accomplish. It's giving you that in-person type experience that most people are looking for when they want to enter into a new venture or when they want to talk to someone. How many times have you ever read an email and accidentally took the email out of context? So those face-to-face interactions help to limit that type of question within the conversation. Now, they absolutely say that over half of communication is all done via body language. So video will help with this because you can get people's expressions. You can read their body language. So there's a lot to do in terms of that collaborative effort that video is going to help with. Now, if we want to take a look at kind of where we were and where we're going, you could look at the web itself and almost look at it from a decade standpoint. So how were things in the 90s and how are they today? In the 90s, everybody knows the absolute buzz in the industry, especially in the technology industry, was the web. We had the whole .com boom that happened. Granted, there was a bubble burst, but it held on, and it's still increasing today in terms of the amount of technology that we can put on there, as well as the reasons why things like the internet exist. So in the 90s, we were looking at things like e-business. How can I use the web to help automate a lot of the tasks within my company, and how can I use that technology in order to help my own business from either a sales standpoint or a productivity standpoint? Now today we're using things like video technology in order to extend on those capabilities. Video itself is not replacing web communication. It's actually using the web in order to connect all of those end users or all of those video components together. Reason why people are looking more into video is more for its collaborative aspects. So going back to that face-to-face experience, or being able to read a story versus actually watching a clip of it has a lot more power behind it. And it's giving it that human factor where you can actually look in to the activities that were actually happening, whether it's from a video conference itself or even from a video on demand where it may be some type of training video or something like that, where I can gain a little bit more understanding typically from a visual tool other than just reading straight text. Now, it's absolutely helping to have an impact on productivity. It's really the utmost in collaborative technology. So being able to meet with people face-to-face, whether it's inside my organization or outside my organization. Now, it's also having a huge social impact. In the past, we wrote letters to other people to keep in touch, and then that transformed into emails, transformed into instant messaging. Now it's transforming into face-to-face conversations with people anywhere around the world. So it is giving you that interactive social capability. And you can bring those down to a business level as well. So being able to interact with your own employees as well as your own clients in a more collaborative environment. Now, when we talk video, there's a lot that goes on the back-end side from what we like to refer to as a video-ready network. And this can be a big question for a lot of people out there that are interested in video technology and using it in their own business world. Do I have what I need in order to accomplish this? Now, when we look at networks today, we're looking at moving more into a converged type environment. So a lot of companies out there are looking into things like service technologies like voice over IP to add to an existing or augment onto an existing network. So that's one of the big pieces that has to be aware is my network itself. My network itself not only has to support all of the data that's coming onto the network, but it also has to look into all the different technologies and devices that are now present on today's networks. So we're no longer looking at just desktops. We're looking at maybe a desktop, a mobile device like a tablet or a laptop that has video capabilities built into it, looking even into Wi-Fi devices like an iPhone or a BlackBerry device that can come onto the network. So there's a lot of challenges that come into play when we start adding new technologies to the network, And really, we need that framework to be in place. There's 3 different pools that a video network, a video-ready network really falls into. And it has to do with a lot of the interactions that I can have with video, whether it's personal video, whether I'm communicating with another person, whether it's social video, and I'm creating media content so that I can share with my fellow peers or with clients in order to promote a service that my company may have, or looking into things like self-sufficiency or interactive technologies. The big driver behind that is the content behind it. So how can we create a network and create a framework that's going to support all of these different technologies that I'm bringing onto it, with video being the real driving force behind it. Now, from a business video standpoint, so how can I use this in order to change the way that I really would really operate in the business world? For one, collaboration. I think I've said that term about 30 times already, but it really is one of the main drivers for video technology. So it's no longer having to ship 12 people from one coast to the other coast just to have a sales meeting, when I could sit in the comfort of my own office and be able to go home at night and still gain that collaborative aspect to accelerate all of the decision-making that's going on, or in order to create different business processes that are coming out. Absolutely, from a safety and security standpoint. So a lot of people, when they talk video surveillance technologies, it's more used to kind of protect against what would be deemed devious behavior, so people stealing things. But it's also from a safety aspect. Think of it as if you were in the hospitality world and you had someone fall down the stairs, and they blamed it on something in the business that caused that. It can actually give you a safety net. Why? Because you have it taped and you have it on video, in order to, I don't want to make it sound bad, but to almost prove your innocence into it. Now, it's also gaining a customer intimacy aspect. So how can I bring this technology out to my customer base and allow them to gain that face-to-face experience that many people are looking for when they choose different business partners, or choose a company in order to do business with. Now, I'm also looking at operational excellence. So how can I manage a more global aspect, or a multi-office setup, and have them act like they were all in one location? How can I also start managing the different complexities that are being added onto my network, as well as go to the end goal of this and gaining that video technology? Now, some of the trending that's happening out there, if you think video is a newer technology to the network, think of the last time that you watched just a quick video clip on the web. So that's where it really all began, when we're starting to converge this technology onto our existing networks. In the past, a lot of video networks, or if we looked at traditional things like video conferencing, were disparate networks, where I would have circuits set up between my locations in order to use this type of technology. Nowadays, we're converging it onto a network where we have not only my data traffic, but my voice traffic, as well as now video traffic on the same framework, and it is exploding. So the numbers that are out there is by 2012, you're looking at almost 70% of the traffic on the internet is being video traffic. Now, whether that's consumer traffic or things like IPTV, we're all bringing this down into a business video pool. So the education sector is one of the biggest drivers in video traffic. Why? It's so that I can have and bring in experts into my classrooms for doing things like distance learning, where I may not have that resource local, but I have students that may benefit from from getting a hold of an expert in that area. Maybe it's for some type of specialty class where I just don't have that resource local. I can still allow that to come in. The education sector is also looking at things like digital signage, which would also be a form of video, so that I can make my students more aware of events that are happening, or, God forbid anything happens on the school. We've all read stories about, some of the horrific events that have happened at education, in education environments. How can I make my students more aware in a lot faster manner? I can start using video technology in order to keep them up to date on what's going on. Now, we're also seeing things like the manufacturing industry. They're expecting one of the biggest increases in video usage, and that aspect is coming from the collaborative standpoint. If you've ever seen some of the video commercials on TV, one in particular about a company that was trying to create a new skateboard, they go through all the different steps that a typical manufacturing company would go through, from a product development to design to bringing it out into the public and getting feedback on it before they actually roll it out into production itself. All of that was, all the time that was needed was decreased by using video technologies in order to better collaborate with all of the people that are involved, whether it's within the company or outside the company in terms of partners or customers or clients that are involved in that. Now, when we talk video itself, it's not just necessarily a new technology that we're adding to the network. And I would hate to look at video as just a new product that my company was going to look into, because that approach can get you kind of in a little bit of trouble with all that's needed to be looked at on the back-end side. So the way that I like to look at video is more as a strategy for my business. People don't just use technology for the sake of using it. There's always an end goal or an end purpose of why they want to look into a new type of technology to bring into their business. Now, when we talk integration, when we're talking about video, we're looking at from what's commonly deemed as an any-to-any type of video strategy. So I can take any type of content, and if you think about how many different types of video content are out there, everything from Flash to DVD to all of the different file types that you can find on the internet, how can I actually provide a common framework for all of those pieces to be seen at any time from anywhere, looking at any piece or any device, I should say, and get the same experience out of it. So that leads right into the simplicity of it. So no longer do I have to go to a specialized portal in order to view something. I can use the device that's easiest, that I find easiest to use, and get the same experience out of it. And also looking at the most important piece is looking at the performance. So this goes down into a lot of the, what I like to refer to as a site survey within your own capabilities that you have right now. What may need to be upgraded, what may need to be introduced as a new technology in order to make sure that I can support all of the different services that I'm going to be bringing onto the network. And this has a lot to do with not only the platforms that my users are using, but also on the back-end side to make sure that my network as a whole can handle it all. Now, some of the solutions that you'll find in video, video itself kind of sometimes gets pigeonholed as being all about video conferencing. Well, that is a big piece of it, but it's also being extended out into a lot of other formats. So one of the big ones that we're looking at is Telepresence. So how do I gain that lifelike feel within a video conferencing scenario? Also looking at things like physical security in the video world. So going to that safety and surveillance type approach to using video. Using digital media, how can I promote a service or a product that my company might be selling, or provide out things like informational alerts throughout my organization from a physical standpoint, so setting up screens versus just sending out a simple email or having to print up flyers. How can I also implement things like business TV? If I wanted to create different informational channels for the users within my my organization, or whether I wanted to set up my own type of basically TV channel lineup, I can also look into video to be able to do that. More and more people are familiar with technology out there that YouTube has helped to explode. How can I take that technology and bring it in-house so that my own users can use that style of social media in order to increase their productivity, their knowledge, their training from an internal aspect? And last but not least, how can I integrate this into a unified communication environment? So if some of you are out there already using a voice over IP system, how can I bring video very easily into my environment? Where from a unified communication aspect, what people are typically looking for are those collaborative aspects of video. So how can I introduce things like video chatting or video calls? How can I create collaborative aspects? So using technology like WebEx or GoToMeeting from a collaboration application. What the driving force behind all of this is what in the industry is kind of known as a media net. So how can I bring all these different types of video technologies and spread them out over all the different business video systems that I have? Now, one of the big challenges that a lot of people will run into with video is making sure that the experience is worthwhile. So the properly laid out video is meant to give you an experience like you're talking to someone face to face. So being able to pick out the body language within within that conference call or within that collaboration environment so that I can get a real good experience over it. How can I duplicate that even though I may be 1,500 miles away from the person that I'm talking to? In the past, it was all voice communication, and the only real indication you had was someone's tone as they were talking on the phone. Now I can actually take that to a new level and provide a better customer experience for my internal employees or even connecting with outside clients. How do I take the complexity out of video? If you've ever tried to play video on your own computer, somebody sends you a file or something like that, how can I deal with all the different formats that are out there, all the different devices that can play video? And there's solutions to all of that. Now, how can I make video more interactive? So maybe I just want to be able to see that real-time video conference, or better yet, what if I was watching an hour-and-a-half long video, but I only wanted to see the pertinent parts that I wanted to pick out of it? How can I make that my video solution more interactive? As well as looking at things like capacity, and this is where that site survey type aspect really comes into play. Do I have enough storage on the back-end side if I'm going to look into a solution that's more, say, video on demand or that YouTube-ish type video solution? Do I have enough bandwidth within my internal network, or better yet, do I have enough bandwidth coming into my environment to be able to support this if I'm going to extend out that video video technology to the outside world? One of the big drivers behind my last statement is that not only has the technology involved, but there's a couple needs that are forcing this, and one of the big ones is the internet. So if we looked at how it was used, how networks were used in the past, we looked at our own internal organization and how do I connect up those, my business machines within my organization. So that was a couple decades ago. And then introduce the internet, and how does that change the way that I can, how does that change the way I can do business on a daily basis? How can I, from a business standpoint, how can I make my business more transactional ready? So keeping it up into extending out the reach of my company. Nowadays, we're looking at technologies that are moving into more of that media net, and video is the biggest driver of all of this. So, like I said, in 2012, over 70% of the traffic on the internet is going to be video traffic. And why people see the value in that collaborative aspect and getting that more face-to-face experience. The internet is one of those things that needs to evolve in order for it to be supported as a whole. So, and if you've heard of some of the initiatives that have come out here in the States, doing things like the broadband initiative. So our internal infrastructure within the country itself has recognized the need to make sure that not only a single entity needs to be able to support this, but in order to connect all of those entities together, we need to have that in place. So some of the things that are more on the neat side of video is how I can take all these different technologies and find different ways to integrate them together. So how can I take my traditional disparate networks, so things like if we were to take YouTube, for example, from this, how can I take the content from that, or how can I create the content for that, upload it to that site, but then also access that content from another interface so that I didn't have to go out to that web page in order to get the content. What if I wanted to push that content out to a sign that was within my organization, or better yet, bring that content into a video conference I'm having with another office or with another client? How can I extend that out to the web? So how can I bring this into things like web collaborative applications and integrate them all together? Now, this is what makes video a very neat technology from a business standpoint, because now I can start looking at any type of device using any type of video application and accessing from that same interface. So the true definition of unified communication. and minimizing the number of interfaces that I need. Oops, sorry about that. And then looking into unified communication and adding video to it. So a lot of the same applications that I'm using today. So my IP phone, how can I start adding video content to that communication mechanism? I can do that through video telephony. So a lot of today's IP-enabled solutions are video ready, and it's very easy to add this on as another layered service into the solution. How can I use my desktop? So an interface that I use every day in my working environment, how can I start adding video down to the desktop, whether it's from a video on demand perspective or looking at it from a unified communication, adding that video capability into my everyday phone calls. So looking at things like collaboration apps, like those WebEx apps or those GoToMeeting apps that are out there, so that we can bring in multiple different people into into a collaborative environment, and not only be able to share documents or chit-chat while we're on an audio bridge, but also adding in another layer into that personal interactivity, so bringing in that video concept. And then last but not least, also looking at bringing in my different offices or connecting in to another business partner. How can I use that common framework of my IP network and port over my video conferencing capabilities onto that unified framework, so that now I have all of my services as the IP-enabled services running off of my network. So whether it's a simple point-to-point video conference, or if we're looking into more of that telepresence type, lifelike room-based conferencing. Now, speaking of telepresence, this is actually one of the most talked about new mechanisms into adding another level to video conferencing. So to kind of define what telepresence really is, think of it as an advanced video conferencing system. Now, that sounds pretty boring right off from a descriptive term of it. But think of it as sitting in your own conferencing room, but the people on the other side of the table may be 1,500 miles away from you, and you're getting that that life-size interaction, so that it would make you feel that the people on the other side of the conference were in the same room as you. So no longer do I have to look at a little 3-inch by 3-inch square on my desktop, or looking at a full room-based video conference, maybe off of a plasma screen or something like that. But I can get that lifelike video conference where it almost makes you want to get up and shake the other person's hand. The experience is so real, and it does allow for things like that direct eye contact, where I can see exactly the exact body language of the person sitting across from me. Now, this is a good example of just from a picture shot of what you could expect from a telepresence type solution. And if you can notice, it's really meant to recreate the other side of that conference room in a lifelike, in a life-size environment. So to really gain that collaborative aspect of true video conferencing. Now, the unique part about this is that if you look at from a screen standpoint, what you're looking at in the background are literally television screens, very high-definition television screens. But each one of these screens could be a different office anywhere around the world, and it gives the illusion that everyone is in the same room for a collaborative sake. Now, what does it mean? For one, video conferencing absolutely has a lot of return on investment in it. For one, I work for a large company that does a lot of traveling, so there's a lot of expenses that go along with that. Using a solution like this literally saves money every day by taking away from those travel expenses. And when most people think of travel expenses, it might be just the cost of the flight. But if I were to show you a typical expense report from a 3-day trip that I have, there's expenses all over the place, from all of the food, all of the travel, all of the lodging that I can run into, all of the entertainment costs that can come into it. And by using video conferencing technologies, it can help to alleviate some of those expenses. It's also used quite frequently for those time-sensitive issues. So looking at things from a collaborative aspect, so Typically when an issue needs to be solved, I may need to bring in other parties. So again, incurring those travel expenses to get them all into one location to help hash out a business problem that we're having. A telepresence solution can absolutely help to create a faster resolve time on those business critical issues that a lot of companies run into. One of the other things that it's helping with is that Go Green initiative that a lot of companies are looking into. So how can I look at technology to help cut my company's carbon footprint? So from an environmental aspect and a cost aspect. Now, one of the other neat uses for telepresence is to extend your reach out and to gain that face-to-face interactivity with customers or clients, even though physically you may not be able to be there. What this usage is showing right here is more of a lobby ambassador feature, where that lobby ambassador may be responsible for 30 different offices, but using this technology, I can still get that face-to-face type interaction for my customers and be able to interact directly with them. Now, Kevin, that's all I had for today. Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate you having me on. You know, video is definitely one of the more exciting technologies that I have the ability to start helping design out for a lot of customers. So it's you know, if anybody has any questions about it, you know, absolutely, feel free to ask.
Absolutely, Michael. Thank you so much for your time. And on that note, why don't we jump into the question and answer? Sure. Our first question is from Kelly, and Kelly wants to know, how do you know if your infrastructure can support video?
The age-old question of, can I do this? The true answer that I would give to anyone that I'm helping to consult would absolutely be a site survey. Now, it has a lot to do with what types of video technologies you want to bring into your organization. So if I was doing something more along the lines of streaming video, it would have a different set of requirements than something like Telepresence would have in terms of the infrastructure that has to be in place. The only true way in order to make sure that your infrastructure can handle this is through a site survey.
On that note, in terms of the differentiation in terms of the user experience, we have a question here from Alan, and Alan wants to know, is there a good solution to integrate telepresence with computer desktops?
There is. And it has a lot to do with, if you remember this slide that had you know, all the different video technologies and kind of all the lines connecting them all together, it's looking at other applications that can recognize telepresence, so in bringing it down into more of a desktop environment where I may be able to open up that video stream through an application running off my desktop. So in the video world, it's simply known as just desktop video capabilities. But there absolutely is a way to bring telepresence information down into organizations or get people involved that might not necessarily be in that telepresence room at that moment.
I got another question here from Graham. Graham wants to know what type of bandwidth or latency is needed for a video conferencing application.
Well, the tough part is that video is meant to run exactly like voice communication is. So from a latency standpoint, that's something that absolutely needs to be looked at. So it's the whole concept of people being able to wait for a web page to load. But if that had a huge delay in the voice, my voice communication, that conversation is not going to be that productive. Video is the same way, where video is meant to replicate that real life or that in-person type experience. So latency definitely does come into play. What actually layers on top of that is the bandwidth that's needed. Now, typically, if we were to look outside the organization, we're needing a minimum of about 384K worth of bandwidth, all the way up to 6 meg, depending on if we want to get into high definition. So, and it goes down to, from a bandwidth standpoint, the lower the bandwidth that's needed, typically the less quality the video is. The higher the bandwidth, typically more, the better quality video stream that you're going to get into the environment. So again, you know, I hate not to be able to give you an exact answer on that, but there's so many variables that come into it.
Michael, another question about integration. How can I integrate a video conferencing solution into my existing voice over IP environment?
That's a good question. There's a lot of companies out there in the voice over IP world that are what's called video ready. Now, typically for a lot of the vendors out there in the voice over IP world, whatever call control protocol that they're using is typically built into their call processing aspect. Why? Because it's used to handling different things like, not to use a very technical word, but utilizing things like codecs. And a codec, what it is a compression-decompression agent. So it knows how to read that type of stream that's coming through, just like a voice over IP stream would come in. So a lot of the more popular voice systems themselves are video ready already. Now, whether it's from a telepresence standpoint, down to your simple desktop or using a little eyeball camera to integrate into your voice over IP system, most of the major voice over IP vendors out there already support this on their platforms. It's just the, adding that as another element to your voice over IP system.
Michael, one last question here. What type of businesses are looking into telepresence solutions?
Lots of them. For one, what a lot of companies are looking into are they're trying to save the age-old question of OpEx. So how can I keep my operational expenses down? For a lot of companies, it's worth taking that capital expenditure. So looking at, for instance, a telepresence solution, and putting it into place in order to help on the back-end side from an operational standpoint. So again, you know what, I'll use my company for an example. I have thousands of people that travel every year. And we've started to use video conferencing technology to help alleviate a lot of the cost. I mean, my company spends millions of dollars every year just in travel expenses. And we've already started to see returns on that. So video conferencing itself can come into almost any vertical itself. My uncle is a surgeon that his house is about 40 miles away from the hospital. So, most of his stuff is pre-scheduled, but when he has emergencies or needs to do an emergency consultation, he uses video conferencing technology to not only connect with his own hospital, but to other partner hospitals that he works with as well. You can also use it for that manufacturing that vertical, are looking into it as well from a collaborative aspect. So how can I reach from a product development to an in-production cycle much, much faster? Now, again, education's starting to look into it as well. So looking at things like distance learning and how can I get a more personal feel to from an instructor/student relationship.
Thank you, Michael. And
I can keep going with those examples, Kevin.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you again, and thank you all for your participation and insightful questions. I hope this webinar met your expectations. Terakai will be hosting these regularly, and we'd love your thought and input on topics. Thank you again, and good afternoon.